And we are live. Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Welcome to the last news review. I was gonna say of the year, not of the year, but of the season. Yes, we're finally there. Is the final one, well, not the final stream, the final one news review in English. I still have the stream in on Friday in French, and we'll do like a gaming stream next week. But for news review, that's the last one. After that, you will be free of me for a month and a half. I mean, we're what, 15th of July. Yeah, I guess I will restart the season somewhere beginning of September. Yeah, but definitely the beginning of September. But yeah, you will get 1 month and a half without me yapping about European news. That will be a rest for you, that will be a rest for me, that will be a rest for everyone. Although I say a rest for me, not so much, because I still have I will still use the time to do many things for the channel. As usual, when it's the summer and the Christmas break, and that's the moment where I can work on the channel, do the update, all the things that need to be updated, work on new content, prepare stuff, etc. So that when it restarts, well, things are pre-prepared and you're happy to discover, oh look, he actually did something for once. But we made it through. So like I said, today news review, English of course. Friday, political FAQ in French. And next Tuesday, I haven't decided yet the time, but probably in the afternoon, it's gonna be a gaming stream. There will be a link with Europe. You will see. I don't want to say yet the game. It's a game we have never played. No, it's not a game I've ever played on stream. But there will be a link somehow with the theme of the channel. You will see. I haven't decided yet if it's gonna be in English or in French. It will depend a bit on the mood on the day. But yeah, and then it will be actual end of content until beginning of September. But before that, we have a news review to go through, as you know. And I know before that, also, since I'm doing all the updates at the time of during your days, if there are things you want me to see for the next season, content, ideas, whatever, that's the moment to make this suggestion, because that's the moment I will have time to potentially implement them. So if you have feedback, ideas, do share them here or on the Discord, and I will be happy to look at them and see whether I can make them happen or not. But yeah, now let's go into the content of the day, so the news review. So what are we going to talk about today? Today we're going to look at the latest discussions on Europe putting sanctions / trade measures on Israel, particularly on products coming from illegal settlements in the West Bank, and all the debate it creates between member states and even between the European Commission and the Council on whether or not it should happen, it should be done, under what rules, etc., etc. Then we'll continue the discussion we've had on the French news review on Friday, which is about the potential ban on social media for minors. Since on Monday, the commission, there was a report made by experts and commissioned by the European Commission that was given to von der Leyen, and so that was let's say the preparation for a policy that many people are expecting to see coming and being announced in September during the SOTU, the speech on the State of the Union. So we'll read a bit what the report is saying and how von der Leyen herself is positioning herself. And to finish, a couple of articles on trade policy, one on the US and one on China. That way, still nice to see the updates here and there. And yeah, as usual, if there are other things you want to discuss, you have 10 fingers and a chat. You let me know, and we go ahead. Speaking of going ahead, I'm going to lift a bit my chair because I feel a bit low. It's small, but psychologically it makes all the difference. All right. Do I have anything to tell you before we start? I don't think so. So I guess we can dive right in. Up. Let's change this. There we go. Okay, so as you know, or as you don't know maybe, ever since the start of the war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza, the strikes following the 7th of October attack by Hamas, there's been a lot of discussions on whether or not the EU should implement sanctions against Israel due to the violence and the violence of the military response they showcase with the massive bombardment, tons of civilian death, etc., etc. As usual, when it comes to Israel, member states who are the one who oversee sanctions and that sort of things are very divided. You have part of the member states that are very much pro-Israel, other member states that are very much pro-Palestinian. And so, of course, since sanctions have to be taken unanimously, that meant that there was actually no sanctions or very little sanctions taken against Israel. And one that is coming back through the window is the idea, there was discussion of should the EU suspend or not the association agreement, which is kind of an agreement that oversees trade, cooperation on a number of programs. Also, for instance, the fact that Israel can benefit from research program, Erasmus, that sort of thing. So there were debates on whether or not that agreement should be suspended or not. There was no agreement on this because, again, member states are divided. But lately, there's been, again, a discussion on something much more targeted, on the question of what do you do about the illegal settlement? So, as you know, so you have the state of Israel, and you have borders that are between Israel and what could be a Palestinian state that has been fixed since, or defined, according to borders defined in a UN resolution of 1967, which are considered like, let's say, the borders between Israel and what could be the official borders between Israel and what could be a Palestinian state. And over time, Israel has consistently pushed those borders beyond what they're supposed, beyond the limits of this resolution, by enabling illegal settlement, meaning that you had a bunch of Israeli colonists who went in the West Bank, which is part of the territory that could be Palestinian, or belong to a Palestinian state, and basically build settlements. Those settlements are obviously illegal under international law because this is not Israeli territory, so they should not be installing themselves there. Israel is looking the other way when it's not openly supporting these illegal settlers. It's a way to put pressure on the Palestinians and everything. And these settlements, which are illegal, there is no debate on the illegality of the settlements. Everybody agrees that these settlements are illegal, apart from Israel, of course. And these settlements may produce stuff, for instance, agricultural products. And one question is, what do you do with these products that come from illegal settlements and that could end up being exported to Europe that does not recognize and consider illegal these settlements? And so there is a debate on what you should do about this. Currently, the rule is that, since a ruling of the Court of Justice, if I'm not mistaken, the rule is that products coming from the illegal settlements are supposed to be marked. If you have two products coming from Israel one from Tel Aviv and one from the settlement, you have one that has to say made in Israel, and another one that has to indicate that it comes from, of course, in a illegal settlement, there is another appellation, like a West Bank settlement or something like that, basically to differentiate what is coming from the Israeli, internationally recognized Israeli territory, and what comes from these illegal settlements. What's the point of this difference? This product can still be imported in the EU, but they do not benefit from the trade advantages that are granted by the EU-Israel Association Agreement, that says preferential tariff rates, reduced quotas, etc., etc. That is reserved only for the products that come from the internationally recognized Israeli territory. Anything that comes from these settlements can still be sent in Europe, but it cannot benefit from the reduced tariff and everything. So, in theory, that's what's supposed to happen. There's an all other debate on whether these products are actually marked like this, or if someone is just saying, yeah, actually it's made in Israel, and so under the rug, and it benefits from the trade policy of the EU-Israel. That's another debate. But now there's a question on whether or not we should just not ban products from the settlement instead of tolerating them and just having them being in a separate kind of legal box. And so there's been a fight over this over the past few days, with a bunch of member states on the one hand, other member states on the other, and also the European Commission having a stake and trying to basically slow down this process. And so on Monday, the member states were discussing this. So that's, I'm saying so all the time, that bothers me. But yeah, that's the background, let's say, of this discussion. So let's go. I really need to find another word to say instead of so. Now I'm hearing it all the time. It's terrible. And I was again about to say so. Donc, which is my so in French. Israel critical capitals force von der Leyen showdown over illegal settlement. A push for tougher limits on trade with West Bank settlements, so the illegal settlements from Israel, is set to dominate a gathering of EU foreign ministers in Brussels, which took place on Monday. So first we're going to read about the state of play, and then I will read about the result of the discussion. So a group of EU countries want to force the European Commission to crack down on trade with illegal Israeli settlements, ramping up a standoff with Brussels over its Middle East policy. So you understand that the Commission is not so keen on preventing trade with stopping trade of products coming from the illegal settlements. We'll discuss the reasons why afterwards. The group of states, which include Belgium, the Netherlands and Spain, is looking to assemble a majority to force the Commission to propose limiting trade with the settlements, according to 4 diplomats aware of the efforts, granted anonymity to discuss the sensitive plans. The diplomat confirmed the effort, but declined to identify every country supporting it. The fight is increasingly pitting EU institutions against one another, as well as dividing national capitals, which is a classic whenever you're talking about Israel in the Council or in the Commission. One side are countries pressing for tougher action, backed by EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas. On the other are Ursula von der Leyen's Commission and countries including Germany and the Czech Republic. Foreign ministers meeting in Brussels on Monday, so last Monday, will stop short of deciding whether to impose tariff or restrict imports. The immediate question is whether the countries behind the push can secure the majority needed to demand a formal Commission proposal that governments could vote on later. Any resulting trade measures would have limited economic impact. Trade with illegal West Bank settlements makes up for about 0.5% of the EU's overall trade with Israel, according to the Commission's estimate in a confidential discussion paper seen by Politico. So, it's not a big deal let's say economically. It's more for the symbol of it, the principle of it. But as has become common since Hamas' October 7, 2023 attacks against Israel and the ensuing war in Gaza, the issue ballooned to dominate the foreign minister's agenda ahead of Monday's meeting, overshadowing other subjects such as a push to finalize a 21st package of sanctions against Russia or the bloc's relations with Gulf countries. The settlements are illegal, said Nacho Sanchez Amor, a Spanish lawmaker of the European Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committees, and nobody is debating that. The best solution is simply to prohibit any imports of goods produced in the settlements, which is a point of contention. The German-led commission has resisted proposing trade measures against the settlement, arguing that similar proposals have previously been tabled and rejected. That's indeed something that during the height of the war between Israel and in Gaza and Hamas in Gaza, the commission tried to propose to put on the table possible sanctions, and they put, okay, given that we have reports that Israel is not respecting the conditions of its trade association, which include the respect of human rights, do member states want to suspend part or all of that not trade agreement but association agreement? And as it happened, there was no majority, there was no unanimity, there was no majority for it. And so the commission is saying, well, we tried, that didn't work out, why should we try again? I'm just checking, okay, I'll continue. So the EU executive, so the commission, is flanked by Prague as well as Berlin, which intends to veto or abstain on any vote concerning tariff on Israel, according to a senior EU diplomat familiar with Berlin's thinking. Kallas, who is due to preside over Monday's meeting, has publicly urged the Commission to come up with new trade measures. The top diplomat is currently locked in a dispute with Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar over reports she used the word apartheid to describe the Israeli state. Gideon Sa'ar being... is it... Shit, now I'm having doubts on whether... Gideon Sa'ar, there's a so in the Netanyahu government you have the guys from the party of Netanyahu, but then you're also like ministers from smaller far right parties, like very far right parties that have been very problematic. I'm wondering if there's one that is for sure like the Minister of Security, and I'm not sure if the Foreign Minister is part of them. Let's see, Gideon Sa'ar. Hop, parti. He's from a party called New Hope. Yeah, I think it's that one of those far right parties inside the nationalist parties inside the Israeli government. And so there's been like constant back and forth between these ministers, and notably Kaja Kallas, because Kaja Kallas recently, a couple of months ago, she said that during a debate, she said that Israel was an apartheid state in the way it behaves, it treats Palestinians on its territory, which is absolutely not the EU position, and that was maybe a position personally, but that's not the official position of the European Union, and so she got backlash from Israel. She's basically persona non grata in Israel now, but also from member states who told Kallas, wait a minute, that's not our position. Don't say that sort of thing, because that's not the EU position, that Israel is an apartheid country. And so since then, like Kallas has been pushing a bit the envelope on that. So Sa'ar said in a post on X on June 18 that he would cut off all contact with Kallas pending an apology or clarification of the reported comments. And while efforts are underway behind the scenes to patch up the relationship, The pair, who were in frequent contact during the Gaza war, have not spoken for at least 3 weeks. Speaking to reporters ahead of Monday's gathering, 3 of the diplomats suggested that the Commission was deliberately avoiding putting forward any measures that can quickly be put to a vote by EU ministers. The Commission, facing a direct request from EU leaders, did announce a series of options for limiting trade with the illegal settlements in the days leading up to the Foreign Affairs meeting. So, Commission waiting until the last moment to put options on the table, saying, okay, if you wanted to do something, this is what you could potentially do, but look, it's like a week before your meeting. Well, you won't have time to analyze it and take a decision, of course. But the paper they circulated, which float a licensing system as well as prohibitive tariff as potential ways of targeting trade with the settlements, does not amount to a formal proposal that EU countries can vote on. In order to get that, a majority of countries must ask for one, hence the push to form a majority ahead of Monday's meeting. I don't think we are in a situation where we have the joyful cooperation of the Commission, said a senior EU diplomat. Then there's the thorny issue of whether the measures are trade policy or a tool of the bloc's common foreign and security policy. A crucial distinction because the former requires only qualified majority of countries to approve it, while the latter, including sanctions, requires unanimous backing. So depending on which policy you consider this falls into, the majority required or the support required is completely different. If you're talking trade, qualified majority, so 15 member states representing 65% of the EU population, or if you are in foreign policy and sanctions, then it's unanimity, which you know you're not gonna get because Germany, Prague, and others are absolutely against it. The Commission and Berlin have both argued that the measures are CEFSP, so foreign policy and security policy, and need unanimous backing. The countries calling for tougher measures dispute this, pointing to an opinion from the European Council Legal Service, first reported by Politico, which states that the measures would only need a qualified majority. So, when member states internally within the Council asked their own legal service, okay, if we wanted to do that, what would be the competence, what would be the majority required? And the legal service of the council said, well, in our opinion, that would be trade policy, meaning that would be qualified majority. And the Commission is saying, no, that's unanimity. So the Council's legal service has been very clear, said the senior EU diplomat. This is about trade, it's about protecting our trade policies. Which one might argue is a bit of a stretch, because the reason they are talking about this is not because there is an imbalance in trade with Israel or illegal things happening on trade between EU and Israel. It's actually a way to put pressure on Israel on other things. So even if it's a trade tool, it's a trade tool used in a context that is very much linked to foreign affairs and security policy. Critics of von der Leyen said the German politician is deliberately avoiding action ahead of Israeli elections coming up in October, an approach that EU officials privately acknowledge, arguing that any new sanctions or measures against Israel could be weaponized by extremist political figures, such as the National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir. So basically, Commission is saying, yeah, if we take sanctions that objectively have little impact, if we take sanctions against Israel, the only one who are going to be helped there are the people that actually we do not like in the Israeli government, which are the most extremist faction in the government, because they will be able to say, look, Europe is against us, they're taking sanctions against us, we need to defend, we need to defend ourselves. And so, let's not feed the troll, let's wait for the elections, and then we'll see. I don't understand that logic. Well, how can I? You mean the logic of the elections? That's what I understand. I mean, let me find an example, a counter example. Let's say I don't know where you come from. Let's say a head of elections in your country. They okay, no, okay, that's another thing. Okay, it's another thing that you don't understand. So you don't understand how they think it's an effective way to bring change. Logically, I mean, it's not about bringing change. It's about, I mean, it's about doing something. It's about doing something in the sense that the EU has been very light on measures against Israel because it is paralyzed when it comes to Israel. There and the question of the illegal settlements are the easiest way to get through that, and it's a way to tell Israel, look, we still have ways to gather majority against you and to show that we're not happy with what you're doing, because otherwise currently Israel is like, who gives a shit about the EU, because no matter what I do, they are too divided to do anything against me. So basically, they don't give a shit about what the EU is doing. So there, I think it's more a question of where can the factions that are more critical of Israel can find an angle to sanction, put pressure on Israel, knowing very well that it's not going to lead. Netanyahu is not suddenly going to say, "Oh well, wait, I'm stopping everything because the trade with the illegal settlements has been sanctioned." It's a political. It's purely political. Where was I? No. Okay. President von der Leyen knows the next formal Foreign Affairs Council is not until October, by which time there will be an Israeli election, said Barry Andrews, an Irish lawmaker from the centrist Renew Europe group in the European Parliament. With innocent people being killed daily, this foot dragging has gone on far too long. So you have those that want to delay as much as possible, and those who say, well, we haven't been able to do shit for 3 years now, well, 2 years rather. Let's just take what we can, which is, even if it's just sanctions against the illegal settlements, at least it's something. So we have this fight between what is a good chunk of the council and the minority in the council, plus the commission, who dragging his feet on this. So that was a bit the one pulling the setting the scene. And now let's look at the result of the discussion that took place on Monday. So full ban on Israeli settlements trade gets the most support from EU countries, Kallas said. EU foreign ministers overwhelmingly backed clamping down on EU trade with Israeli settlements during a closed-door discussion on Monday, with an official source saying the biggest cohort of countries supporting passing new measures without requiring the unanimous backing of all member states. So it seems the faction that wanted to have sanctions against Israel is the one that came up on top. A full ban on EU imports of goods made in Israeli settlements extracted most support from EU foreign ministers during a meeting on Monday, the EU foreign policy chief, Kaja Kallas, has said after the European Commission last week presented a range of options to restrict settlement trade, the boldest of which was a full trading ban. So, member states went for the hardest of the option proposed by the Commission. The option that got the most support was banning the trade with the illegal settlements, Kallas told reporters in Brussels on Monday evening. Israeli settlements in the occupied Palestinian territories are considered illegal under international law and by the EU. EU ambassadors will now be tasked with putting meat on the bone of the Commission initial proposal, a 2-page options paper shared with EU capitals last week and first reported by Euronews. Kallas also said that an extraordinary meeting of foreign ministers could be convened to ensure further progress. There, it's a counter to the Commission, because the Commission was saying, oh, well, that's too bad that the next meeting is in October. And Kallas said, wait. If we actually want to advance, we can do an extraordinary meeting. So we don't have to wait until October if we find a way forward. There's also there where you can also see the rivalry between Kallas and von der Leyen at play here. The next foreign ministerial gathering is scheduled for October, weeks before Israel is due to hold legislative elections, with several diplomats expressing fear that the sensitive timing could further scupper any progress. Italy's Foreign Minister Antonio Tajani, whose backing is considered pivotal if any proposal is to reach the necessary support threshold, so the qualified majority, suggested that no measures should be taken in advance of the ballot earlier on Monday. Crucially, on Monday, a majority of member states also backed framing the measures as a trade rather than a foreign policy tool, which would avoid the need for all EU governments to unanimously back the move. Proponents of the trade ban, including Belgium, France, Ireland, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Spain, and Sweden, had pushed back against the European Commission for arguing that any measures taken should be framed as a foreign policy tool, requiring the unanimous backing of all member states. These countries said such trading restrictions should instead inevitably be considered trade policy, therefore requiring the backing of 15 member states representing 65% of the EU population, known as the qualified majority, a benchmark that many feel could be achieved. These are trade measures, so that means that as far as we are concerned, that should be possible with a qualified majority, Dutch Foreign Minister Tom Berendsen said earlier on Monday. Ministers earlier on Monday also expressed frustration at the EU executive led by Ursula von der Leyen for the lack of detail in the proposal and the delay in its presentation. Which again, the Commission is trying to slow down as much the process as it can. And it's also interesting that the Commission that is usually trying to expand its competence, and usually the Commission does not like unanimity. The Commission is rather saying, oh, well, this policy should be taken on a majority basis. They're conveniently, they're saying, oh, no, actually, it's a unanimity decision. We don't want to work on the competence of member states, which is not a very typical Commission position. It gives me the sense that it's more a bone to chew on than a desire to really move forward, Belgian Foreign Minister Maxime Prévost told reporters earlier on Monday. I am concerned that we are engaging in delay tactics, debating endlessly without taking actions when such debates is not actually necessary. A decision not to trade would simply be an application of international law, Spain's Foreign Minister José Manuel Barrés said. The EU already pursues a policy of differentiation when it comes to settlement manufactured goods, meaning they are exempt from preferential tariff given to products made within Israel and fall outside the scope of the EU-Israel Trade and Cooperation Agreement, known as the Association Agreement. So you can still bring them in the EU, but they don't get the perks. But political calls to fully ban such trade have been gaining momentum given the deteriorating situation in the occupied West Bank. A 2024 International Court of Justice advisory opinion on the illegality of the Israeli settlements, which obliged states to abstain from economic dealings that could entrench the unlawful situation, has also added legal weight to those calls, basically saying, look, we all agree these settlements are illegal. The International Court of Justice is saying that we should not do anything that supports economically this situation, so we can't do trade. We need to ban that. It's a question of international law. It's not a question of sanction. The European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, has been accused by critics of obstructing a decision on banning settlement trade by suggesting that the ban needs the unanimous backing of member states. Von der Leyen, on this, being German, is historically rather keen on having very friendly and soft position when it comes to Israel. She's been criticized. Well, she's the reverse of Kaja Kallas in this instance. Kaja Kallas has been criticized because she's been a bit too forceful in criticism on Israel. Von der Leyen has been criticized for not being forceful enough in dealing with Israel. She's been criticized by member states for putting under the rug the position of the EU when it comes to criticism. When there was in the immediate aftermath of the attacks of Hamas in Israel on 7th of October 2023, von der Leyen went to Israel and she said Israel has a right to defend itself, and stop there. Which was missing a part because the common position of the EU was Israel has a right to defend itself while in the full respect of human rights and international law. There's the second part of the sentence that von der Leyen forgot to mention, which is not, let's say, cosmetic, because Israel is known to, let's say, have a habit of war crimes whenever it's deploying the army. So saying, yes, you have a right to defend yourself in the respect of international law, it's an important thing for the balance of the EU position. And von der Leyen consistently said Israel has the right to defend itself and not saying anything else. Which led to a number of criticism from member states who say, careful, Ursula, that's not the position of the EU. That's the position of Germany maybe, but that's not the position of the EU. And so that's where she's been criticized for taking too much the side of Israel since the beginning of the conflict. Kallas too forceful? She did call Israel an apartheid state, which is not really the position of members of the EU. So she's been she got a slap on the wrist from member state on this. Where was I? Shite, I'm lost in my thing. There, oui. The European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, has been accused... no, actually, I already read that. Kallas, however, cited an oral opinion by the Council of the EU Legal Service, which found that member states could restrict or ban the trade of settlement goods with qualified majority support. Asked about the clash of opinions, Kallas said, "We need to have a unified position, and so far we have not been able to have that unified position. There is a legal opinion that we can do this also with the qualified majority," she added, "and, you know, if there is a will, then we can move forward." So, the faction that wants to sanction Israel has won this round. There is a majority, there is momentum on this. Then the question is, can they convince Italy? Because Italy is, as the article say, a country that could be key on reaching the majority or not. And Italy is historically, especially under Meloni, rather pro-Israel. They've been open to sanctions on illegal settlements, but they're not necessarily keen to do that before the election. So there will be some convincing to be done with Italy to enable the measures to be taken against these Israeli illegal settlements. But again, as it was mentioned, these sanctions are mostly symbolic. They won't have a big impact significant impact on Israel. It's really like the bare minimum. Like they're really looking for whatever they can achieve when it comes to sanctions. At some point there was discussion of sanctioning like violent settlers, Israeli violent settlers. I'm not even sure they managed to there we need unanimity. I'm not even sure they managed to get unanimity on that because the Czech were opposing that. The idea of sanctions against Israel. So yeah, when it comes to Israel, typically that's a topic where the EU doesn't do anything because, well, they are just too divided to do something. But well, sometime they inch forward. Any questions on this before we move on? Up. All right, I don't see any. Let's just move up that notification that doesn't need to be there. There we go. All right, let's change topic then and talk about social media and their potential ban for minors at EU level. We discussed it on Friday for the French news review. On Monday, there was the publication of the report that Van der Leyen was waiting, the expert report on a potential ban, or at least on the measures that could be taken against social media to protect minors. And it is widely expected that Van der Leyen will announce things in September during the annual State of the Union, which is like the big political speech of the year for the Commission, where it announces what it will do for the coming year. And we expect the Van der Leyen to announce potentially a ban initiative to put a EU ban on the use of these social media platforms for minors. Alright, so why the EU's new social media roadmap is tougher than it looks. Europe is playing the long game on holding big tech platforms to account. Monday's release of a much-anticipated EU expert report on protected children online heralds tighter rules for social media platforms and other digital services. While the report backs a minimum age of 13, a lower threshold than those adopted or proposed in countries such as Australia, normally in member states and beyond, like the countries that are thinking about banning social media for minors, the debate is whether it should be at 15 or 16. There, the report is using the age of 13, which is not coming from nowhere because platforms themselves say that they should not be, the user should not be below 13. So they're using the number 13 because that's the age that platforms themselves say, well, our platform should not, you should not be able to create an account if you are 13. Well, they do nothing to check that, but in theory, that's the age you must be to have an account on Instagram, Facebook, etc., etc. The report takes again this idea of 13, but does not necessarily say, well, there should be an official ban. It doesn't go as far. So a minimum age of 13 for accessing online platforms with important caveats. It presents the measure as part of a gradual introduction of minors to the digital world. That approach could pave the way for broader regulation of big tech. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, who has expressed her support for a ban, had ordered the expert study from a German child psychiatrist and French social epidemiologist. The report they delivered offers a far more comprehensive, if at times convoluted, picture of the way forward in the governmental challenge of regulating new technologies that are increasingly embedded in our lives. Here are 5 things the report tells us about how European policymakers are approaching the challenge of reducing the harmful effects of social media and other digital tools. There, the question of the impact of social media on minors is very well documented now. We know that you have addictive features, the way it's being designed is addictive. You have impact on mental health, the impact on attention span, etc., etc. So that's why we are like increasingly all over the world talking about, okay, we should probably restrict the way social media are designed, and two, the way minors access and interact with these platforms as a way to protect them from the consequences of the way they're designed. So hard age limits are insufficient. So the experts, German child psychiatrist Jörg Fegert and the French social epidemiologist Maria Melchior, stopped short of recommending hard age limits for social media access, instead opting for a gradual approach. Toddlers under 2 years old should avoid screens altogether. From 3 to 13, they should not be allowed unsupervised use of internet-enabled devices, with school and parents providing support and oversight. So you're below 2, no screen whatsoever. Between 3 and 13, you can access some devices, but with oversight, direct oversight of teachers and parents. Some EU countries have already proposed or passed their own laws setting hard limits at the age of 15 or 16, with France aiming to have its own in place by September. Estonia has emerged as the only objector to such measures, while Italy is not entirely convinced either. Australia has already imposed its own social media ban for under 16s in December, with lackluster results, because one study found that more than 85% of teens were still using the platforms after the age restriction. Because the question with age restriction is that you need to be able to enforce them. Currently, you're already theoretically not supposed to be below 13 to access social media platforms. Nobody's checking. Instagram is not checking whether you actually be above 13 or not. So you could be 12, you could be 10, you could create a social media account. Now they're doing the platform are enforcing a bit more these rules, in the sense that if they notice that actually the user is below 13, then they will delete the account. But it's not like age verification. So if you do hard limits on social media, saying you cannot be, you can only have accounts from 15 or 16, that brings the question of how do you enforce that? And so, age verification. You would require someone who wants to create a social media account to verify their age, whether it is through apps, governmental apps that have your ID on it, and so send the signal, are you above or below age X, facial recognition, that sort of thing. So there is then a whole debate on age verification and all the question about privacy, that sort of thing. The panel talked a lot about age limits based on the Austrian influence and also different types of legislative initiatives that are already coming up across the European Union, one of the two experts of the report said. We see a lot of circumvention and other problems in Australia for over 13 years. I think we should not have a blanket ban, the other experts said. So saying, yeah, we do a ban, that's nice. It's going to be circumvented very easily if you don't have like a other measure on the side. Second, the onus is on the platforms to prove safety. The report says the burden of proof should shift towards big tech, echoing calls from civil society and child rights advocates. Platforms should first have to prove that they have integrated the key safety feature before becoming accessible to minors. So you have to, if you don't do the hard ban on social media, you need to force platforms to make a child version of their social media and to prove that these versions are actually safe. It's not just, well, I put a line in my terms of uses that say that it must be below 13. you must be above 13. You need to actually work your design, work your platform so that it's adapted to minors. In Europe, whoever develops the product is responsible for its safety. Car manufacturers must make their vehicles safe. We do not expect children to design their own safety seat belts. We do not expect parents to fit airbags at home, and the very same must be true for big tech, said von der Leyen. This line of thinking could put at least some aspect of child safety online into the realm of consumer protection, a set of rules the EU is also set to revamp later this year. So you could see potentially in the DFA, the Digital Fairness Act, some rules that could be put on platforms saying, okay, you have to child-proof your social media. There's an entire debate on, for instance, like the question of should you ban endless scrolling? So you go on TikTok, you go on Instagram, you can scroll infinitely videos, which gets people to stay on the platform. There are debates on whether this feature should not be banned. You have the question of algorithm, etc. So the way platforms are designing their platform and making them addictive should be controlled, and that's, in this sense, a question of consumer protection. In the US, it was under consumer protection provisions that multiple companies have recently been found liable for knowing endangering minors' mental health in recent landmark trials. So we have now also a precedent in the US on the use of consumer protection to control social media. 3. Reaching beyond social media. The discussion and measures regarding age restrictions have so far focused on social media platforms, but the report also takes aim at other services such as artificial intelligence companions and naming the broader category social media plus. What we recommend is not restrictions on access to certain platforms, but restrictions on access to certain types of feature, which can include video game platforms and AI chatbots, the second experts said. Features like algorithmic recommendation system and infinite scrolling are designed to maximize user attentions, and minors are not equipped to deal with their effects, the document reads. 4. It's a long game. The authors of the report and von der Leyen herself said that change will not happen as soon as bans are in place. Our main recommendation is that the internet should be safe for everyone, said the first of the two experts. But this is sort of a long-term goal, whereas age restrictions can be done actually pretty rapidly to protect children, they said. Age restrictions won't be foolproof, and change takes time to embed the cultural change that is already taking shape in our society, the Commission President said. Australia is taking a similar approach, acknowledging that it will need time to adjust and improve its policy. And finally, Brussels won't tell EU capitals what to do. For the past year, Brussels and its capitals have been going back and forth over who should set age restrictions on social media. Capitals have pushed the Commission to do more and then drafted their own legislation when they didn't see enough progress. Basically, okay, Commission, you're not doing anything, well, I'll do it myself. Their plan set 15 or 16 as the minimum age, and they recently agreed that they would prefer a block-wide minimum age for social media use. The problem there is that member states want the Commission to act, most of them, but it takes time. And so they go instead for national measures in the meanwhile. The problem of national measures is that, yes, they are quick. Member states can choose how they design it, and notably the age. The Commission has recently confirmed that the age can be defined by member state when they reviewed the French law. The problem is that it creates fragmentation, because you would have France that would say 15, you have Germany that says 16, you could have Ireland that says 13. So depending on the country where you are, you would have different rules, which is of course not ideal when it comes to European law, especially on digital platforms, because you want to have as unified rules as possible. Which leads back to the idea, okay, Commission, EU, you should do something EU-wide, because that way everybody has the same rule. And it's easier for the member state, it's easier for the platform, it's easier for everyone. The report offers a compromise rather than a definitive answer. It recommends a block-wide baseline of 13 as part of a broader framework for introducing minors to the digital world, while allowing parental supervision to override that threshold in some cases. There, the idea is to say, okay, well, platforms are now integral part of our lives. Minors will be confronted to social media at some point, so it's not by preventing them while they're minors to access this platform that suddenly everything will be fixed. On the contrary, you could have a situation where if they are not confronted to these platforms early, the second they are allowed to create these accounts, they are not equipped to deal with it, and it will create more damage than if they had been gaining used to and get knowledge on how to digital literacy. So the idea is, okay, there are ages where you have to be extra careful, but you can still introduce them to the social media bit by bit with supervision. That way you protect them from the most harmful parts, but they get used to that, they learn skills that will be useful for them later on. And in some cases, parents could decide, okay, well, in that specific case, I can allow the use even if he's below 13 or whatever. So more flexible approach than the black and white, you are under this age or you are above. At the same time, the experts leave room for governments to go further. The report explicitly says member states could impose higher minimum ages, citing Europe's varied historical and national context, which is a bit going counter their previous point with saying, oh yes, we need EU-wide rules. If you do say you have EU-wide rules, but at the same time member states can do what they want, notably on the question of minimum age, which is an important feature, you're sort of contradicting yourself in your own philosophy. But, well, sorry, just removing notification. There we go. All right. Questions on that? Or I have a second article on it, despite this one specifically on von der Leyen, but yeah. All right. We're speed running today, like barely an hour. It's gonna be a short stream. I'm not complaining. I'm a bit tired, but all right, let's go. So von der Leyen convinced by case for age-appropriate social media restrictions, which, to be fair, was not complicated, given that she was already pretty vocal on the fact that yes, there should be age limitations on social media. So it's not exactly a scoop that von der Leyen. Oh, a report that confirms what I was already thinking. I'm convinced. The European Commission President said proposals will be put to member states after the summer. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has called for stronger protection for children online, saying the evidence presented by the special panel on child safety online should help shape future European policy. Von der Leyen said the evidence increasingly supported introducing a minimum age for access to social media and suggested a phased approach for different age groups. During a press conference in Brussels, the EU chief said the argument to ban toddlers from screen and digital platforms, and that children under 13 should only be allowed to use social media under adult supervision and for limited periods, was the most convincing. Social media is not a toy, she said, warning that the status quo, a world where we continue to allow big tech unrestricted access to our children, will only consign another generation to more mental harm, addiction, and misery. According to data from the research, young people spend between 4 and 6 hours a day on screens, while almost 60% of young children have experienced emotional or psychosocial problems online. Harassment, problem with self-image, that sort of thing. The Commission's president backed wider use of age verification technologies. So that goes again with the idea we need a hard ban under 15, under 16, under what age. You need to couple that with age verification technology. Well, the Commission has tried to propose its own age verification app that didn't work out so well because, like, literally the day they presented it, it was hacked. So that didn't exactly help build credibility on that front. But if you want to do age restriction, you need age verification technology. That's kind of a necessity. Otherwise, your ban is just a piece of paper. So stressing that the debate was not about whether children should ever use social media, but whether and when social media can access our children. Von der Leyen also argued that technology companies, rather than parents or children, should bear responsibility for making online platforms safe, as they have a duty of care to their users. In Europe, whoever develops a product is responsible for its safety, she continued. Car manufacturers must make their vehicles safe. We do not expect children to design their own seatbelts. We do not expect parents to fit airbags at home. And the very same must be true for big tech. Dr. Maria Melchior, a co-author of the report, said, "We are all aware of the extraordinary opportunities that technology brings us, but we also know that the potential dangers are just as great." The report identified services that contained age-inappropriate features such as infinite scrolling, autoplay, and persistent notification, describing them as social media plus. Professor Jörg Fergert from the University of Ulm in Germany, who is the other co-author, Salut merci pour le lurk, said on the basis of the evidence we have, we would recommend the EU-wide harmonization of an introduction of an age restriction for access to social media plus under the age of 13. The Commission will review the panel recommendations before presenting legislative proposal after the summer, von der Leyen confirmed, adding, "Because childhood will not wait, and when it is gone, we cannot give it back." So there, like, we have the confirmation, von der Leyen will do the announcement, the actual announcement of the measures during the State of the Union, so it's 16th of September. Which was already expected, and that's going to be quite the battle. Then the question is whether they will just do the because I imagine they will do a package. They will do a package on protecting minors online, and so they will do probably the age restriction, but also potentially banning certain design of social media, and then do you do that in a specific law? Do you do that in upcoming laws that are already planned, the DFA, which is consumer protection? She will probably explain like how wide she wants to go and what tools she wants to use. But it's gonna be a tricky battle, and big tech has already started like lobbying. I mean, of course, lobbying, but they identify the thing. Wait, why is that not active? Let me refresh. Okay, yeah, for a second I didn't have my feedback on my other screen. Because like in Brussels, like if you take the metro, in particular in certain places, like if you go to Metro Schumann, if you go to Gare du Midi, basically the place where you have lawmakers or people come from the capitals coming and going, big tech are doing advertisement there. You have the billboards and everything, and you see billboards of big tech, Google, Meta saying, we provide safety measures for parental control on our social media. Our platform are safe for minors. So playing a bit the idea, look, we're already doing what we need to do when it comes to safety, to this thing that is getting hyped in EU politics. So no need for hard rules. We're already doing everything that is necessary. We're the good guys, which shows that they see that as a risk for themselves and trying to avoid as much as possible hard measures, which is fairly typical. It's not typical. It's not like just big tech is doing that. Again, you go to Metro Schumann, you go to Gare du Midi, you will find quite a few billboards, ads that are very specifically actually targeted to EU decision makers because that's what they go through to go to work and decide on policy. Any questions on this before we move on? Which is again like we're speedrunning that one, so if you have questions, we have plenty of time. Otherwise, we'll go to trade policy. All right. So a couple of articles on trade policy. 4 small updates on the US and on China. The first one is on the US. On the Turnberry Agreement, so the trade deal that is not a trade deal between the EU and the US that put an end to the trade war, decreted a ceasefire in the trade war between the EU and the US, famously approved in last year in Turnberry in the UK. And that was validated by the co-legislators last month. Yeah, last month. And now since the EU is knocking at the door of the US saying, well, I did my part of the deal, your turn. So the EU pushes the US to exempt 150 billion euros worth of EU goods from the Turnberry deal, which is the deal that says the US can put tariff as high as at a maximum of 15% of the value. So Brussels is seeking carve-outs for from the 15% tariff imposed by Washington on EU goods under the trade agreement reached in Scotland in 2025. The list obtained by Euronews includes iconic products such as Roquefort cheese, olive oil, and wine. The European Commission has given the US a list of EU products which it wants to see exempted from the 15% tariff imposed under the trade deal signed by Brussels in Washington in 2025. The list seen by Euronews includes hundreds of products such as Roquefort cheese, olive oil, wine, spirits and beer, pasta, medical devices, electrical equipment, and machinery. EU trade official Matthias Jørgensen told MEPs on Tuesday that the list covered around 150 billion euros worth of EU exports. So, not a small amount. He also said that the products were either economically meaningful for the EU or had a limited domestic availability in the US. So it's something that is economically important for us, or it's something where, US doesn't have a lot of, and so it would be good in their interest to ensure that American citizens, American consumers have access to those products. In July 2025, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and US President Donald Trump clinched a deal in Turnberry, Scotland after weeks, if not months, of trade disputes under which the European agreed to accept 15% US tariff on EU exports, maximum, while removing their own tariffs on US industrial goods. So the Turnberry Agreement, which is like a trade agreement that is not a trade agreement. Why do I say that? because so just for the timeline, April 2025, Liberation Day, Trump announced he's declaring a trade war on the entire world. Well, the entire world, so the people that he likes, so Russia and North Korea. And he puts massive tariff on everyone. On everything, like every product, they get like a X amount of tariff. So the EU was like 40%, I think, if I recall correctly, like 20 to 40%. Trade war declared on everyone. Of course, not everyone was, no one was pleased with this, and there was like a lot of back and forth between the rest of the world and the US to try to push back against this and negotiate trade agreements. Or Trump himself had to fall back because initially he said yes, I will apply these trade tariff and that's gonna be it, and then after, like literally like the day after, given like there was like bad economic consequences in the US, like the markets were falling, companies were freaking out and everything. He then said, well, actually, it's not gonna be right now. It's gonna be in July, and that gives time to the countries concerned to negotiate, potentially deal with me. And if there's no deal, then I will apply the tariff. So Trump had to fall back on his own proposal because the economic circles in the US were freaking out at the idea. So the EU had until July 2025 to negotiate a deal with Trump on trade. That deal, which was concluded in Turnberry, is a political agreement. It's not a trade agreement. A trade agreement is a legal text that says, okay, this is a trade tariff on this product, organizing trade in details between with quotas and everything between two countries or two economic spaces. Turnberry Agreement is not a trade deal. It's a political deal in the sense that it was a piece of paper on which both the EU and the US agreed at political level on, okay, what should trade between the EU and the US look like with certain commitments that we're making. So it's not a trade agreement, it's a political agreement that's had then to be transformed into reality in various laws. In these agreements, the EU obtained that, the deal was unbalanced. It's a deal, it's an agreement that is undoubtedly in favor of the US, and the US is gaining the most of this agreement. The EU does not have like something that is balanced. It's not I give you something, you give me something. It's I'm limiting damages and I give you stuff. But in the political context, in the economic context, it was considered better to have that than an open trade war that would have not been good for the EU at all. And to be fair, the thing that the EU managed to negotiate is among the best that any country around the world has managed to obtain from Trump. But yes, this deal is unbalanced. The EU was committing to remove their tariff on a number of American goods. So there's no tariff anymore on industrial goods and some agricultural products. And in exchange, the US was maintaining tariff on goods, on European goods. So we're removing goods, they still put tariff on our goods. But they were committing to say, okay, it's going to be 15% tariff maximum, all included. Which is what makes the European deal better than most other deals that the US concluded with other countries, because our tariff agreement says it's 15% maximum and all included, meaning that it includes, the 15% includes both the what is called the What is it called in the WTOD? Best country, clause du pays le plus favorisé. Most favored nation clause. So under international law and under WTO rules, if you put a tariff on a product for one country, all countries must benefit from the same level, from the lowest level of tariff. So if your base tariff is 10%, you say, okay, well, my tariff for I don't know, importing beef is 10%. That 10% applies to all countries. You cannot say, well, it's 10%, but only for that country because I like him. And that's it. The other will have 20%. All countries must benefit from that 10%. That's what we call the most favored nation clause. So that the 15% of the Thunberg Agreement includes the tariff under the most favored nation, so the base tariff, and any additional tariff that Trump would want to put on top of that. And though the addition of those two cannot be more than 15%. That's better than the deal of other countries, because if you take, for instance, the UK, which also has an agreement with the US, their agreement says, well, the US commits to not put more than 10% tariff on British goods. So you tell me, but wait, Mep, you just said that the US says that our maximum tariff was 15 and the UK is 10. So the UK has a better deal than us. Except that this agreement is a cap on 10% only on the American part of the trade tariff. It's not all inclusive. Meaning that if you have a product that has a 10% base tariff under the most favored nation clause, so the international law clause, Trump can add on top of that 10% maximum, which means it would reach a total of 20%. It just says the US will never add more than 10% tariff. Our deal says the US can never go above 15% tariff, all included. The all included is what makes our deal better, because you take the same product, 10% WTO tariff, Trump cannot go beyond 15%, so he can put a maximum of 5%, meaning that where the European product will be taxed at 15%, the US product will be taxed at 20%. So we have a better deal because we have this all-inclusive part of the agreement. Alright, let's continue. But that's the base agreement. Then you can negotiate exemptions. So negotiations on exemptions from the duties were also announced in a joint statement by Brussels and Washington published in August 2025, but the US refused to open talks before the EU reduced its tariff on US goods. So the US were like, okay, we can negotiate exemptions to the 15%, but first you need to put the 0% on our own goods, and then we'll talk. And since a deal was reached in May by EU legislators and that Brussels removed its duties on the 1st of July, the European Commission hopes to secure carve-out from the 15% US tariff. So now the Commission said, well, we did our part, now we can negotiate, and here's the list of things we want the exemption on. The joint statement said that the US and the EU would consider applying the tariff that existed before 2025 to products that are important for their economies and value chains. Those tariffs average around 3.3%. So the EU wants to go back to the situation before Trump declared trade war on the entire world. Since 2025, EU countries have been lobbying the Commission, which negotiates on their behalf in trade matters, to secure carve-outs for their main exports to the US. The simple fact that Trump threatened to cut trade with Spain makes me think he still has no idea how the EU works. To be fair, it makes treaty a bit less relevant since he doesn't know what he's saying. That is true. I mean, so for those who haven't followed, Trump doesn't like Spain for quite a few reasons, and recently has announced that he would sanction Spain, he would cut trade with Spain, which indeed is not possible because since in Europe we have a single market, a single customs union, you cannot differentiate trade products coming from Spain from products coming from France because you can because you have made in Spain, made in France, made in thing. But the thing is that if you were to say I put sanctions on anything coming from Spain, the problem is that we have value chains that cross border. You build a car, you will have parts that come from Spain, from France, from Germany. So that means that you will need to track down every single piece from everywhere. You have things that do back and forth, so it's a nightmare. And so in practice, you cannot take sanctions on a particular country of the single market. It's either the entire single market or it's nothing. And while Trump has made this announcement, nothing has happened since then, because probably the people who actually know about trade policy in the US, I mean, it was Trump being Trump. They haven't moved a finger on this because they know, well, actually we can't put sanctions just on Spain, and we're not going to relaunch a trade war with the EU on this. But again, that's typical Trump. He's making a tweet, throwing trash around, but he actually doesn't understand what either he doesn't understand what he's saying, or he actually doesn't give a shit. He's just like to hype up his base who doesn't know anything about the topic. The average MAGA activist doesn't know shit about the rules of EU trade, so he will just be happy. Look, Trump said that he's going to sanction Spain. We don't like Spain these days. That's great. The next day we'll have forgotten about it. Trump will have gained additional support from that guy, and that's it. So it's pure political posturing. And also, like in the treaty itself, in the Thornbury Agreement, you have a bit of that, in the sense something that was discussed a lot at the time of the Thornbury Agreement. So the Thornbury Agreement say the EU cannot be taxed above 15%, but it does say other things. Notably, it says, and that was Trump requesting that, the EU is committing to the European Commission will buy, I don't remember the exact figure, like a $600 billion worth of energy product from the US before the end of the mandate of Trump. And so one of the coverage, look, the EU not only is an unbalanced agreement, but on top of that, we just promised to buy $600 billion of American oil. What about it's creating dependency? What about the green transition, etc., etc. Except that in practice, and there's another thing, like same thing on the investments in the US. There's a bunch of big numbers like this. In practice, these numbers don't mean shit. Why? Because the Commission does not have the competence to do that. Like the Commission is not deciding, okay, well, I'm going to buy $600 billion worth of American oil. It doesn't have that power, and it cannot tell companies to buy their oil from the US. It's simply not something that they can do. And on top of that, the $600 billion makes no sense, because for the EU to be able to import $600 billion worth of energy product from the US by the end of the mandate of Trump, so 2029, basically the US would have to increase its entire production of oil and everything by half and send everything they produce to the EU, which obviously is not going to happen. So that figure is pure science fiction. It's pure science fiction, and the reality of it is just that Trump loves big numbers because he wants to be able to say to his voters, oh, look, I secured that that other countries will buy stuff from us, and so that means that it will create wealth and jobs in the US. Look how great I am. But in reality, these figures are pure bullshit. They are pure bullshit. So the commission said, yeah, sure, like in a pure political declaration that has no legal value. Yeah, sure, we're going to promise that we're going to try to buy $600 billion. Sure, whatever, man. That figure doesn't mean anything. And yeah, Trump will never get that 600 billion. But in the short term, it allowed him to show the muscle and say, oh, look, I did not walk back on my trade war. I obtained something for you. And you will get money and everything. It's pure like political bullshit. I've heard the far right and far left saying the commission was a dictatorship, that we don't have a choice when they're saying, bah. The commission is a smart dictatorship. Huh? You don't know that it's a dictatorship. It's a new kind of dictatorship where people get to vote. It's very specific. Where was I? Yeah. So France, Italy, and Spain have been pushing in particular for more favorable tariff on wine. The EU also hopes to start discussion on steel and aluminium, which are still subject to 50% US tariff. Jorgensen said he expects talks on those products to be challenging. Yeah, because you tell me now, okay, but you just said that the US was promising like 15% maximum, and now the article says that there is 50% on steel and aluminium. What the fuck? The 15% is base tariff. It's like the default. If there is nothing happening, the default is 15%. Then from this baseline of 15%, it can be below. You get exemptions, which is now what the EU is trying to achieve. Or you can have more in specific situation. Like for instance, if you have something that is representing a threat to national security, well then the US government can impose additional tariff. That can go up to 50%. And what the US did for certain products, notably steel and aluminium, they said, well, the fact that we are importing massively steel and aluminium from outside the US is a national security issue, so we are putting 50% tariff on non-American steel and aluminium. So they're using national security as a way to go beyond that 15% baseline that they are defined. And the ironic thing is that technically, these 15% actually are null and void. Well, not null and void, but like there is no legal obligation per se. Because so like I said last year, Trump declared a trade war on everyone, and so he took decisions saying, okay, I'm putting X% tariff on everyone. Problem. At the end of no, it was when was it? End of last year or beginning of this year? I forget. The Supreme Court, the American Supreme Court, said, well, no, actually, that was illegal. You were not allowed to do that. And so all the tariff that Trump announced on the rest of the world suddenly disappeared because they were illegal. And there was a debate at some point, okay, well, since the tariff on which we based ourselves to make the Turnberry Agreement actually are illegal and do not exist anymore, is the Turnberry deal still A, legal, and B, necessary? we could just say, well, screw that. Your Supreme Court said your tariff were illegal. We can go back to the. We don't need the Thunberry deal anymore. The Commission put insane. The US put a lot of pressure to say to the Europeans, no, maintain the deal, maintain the 15%. Otherwise, I will take additional measures. He would find bullshit reasons to increase tariff and everything. And after the ruling of the Supreme Court, he said, okay, fine, I'm putting 10% as a transition measures, and then I will put further tariff later down the track. So he will use other legal justification to put tariff. And the EU said, okay, even if the Supreme Court said that the tariff that caused the Thunberry Agreement were illegal, we will not denounce the agreement, because Trump will just use another legal thing to justify tariff, and we're just going to restart a trade war that we just sorted through. So let's just keep the Thunberry Agreement. That way we are certain that no matter what, we have this security of 50%, and we avoid relaunching a needless trade war, even if legally we would be right to do that sort of thing. They're kind of prolonging the ceasefire, the trade ceasefire with Trump. And all that to say, yeah, that there's still 50% on aluminum and steel coming from Europe. The US has made very clear that for national security reasons, this is an area where the US wants to maintain and protect US production. He told the EU lawmakers. The commissioner also said that despite the Thunberry Agreement, trade relations between the EU and the US would remain a high risk of volatility, pointing to Trump's public threat of 2 EU countries who impose a digital tax on US big tech companies. So, again, this Thunberry Agreement, it's a ceasefire at best. You're buying time until either the end of the mandate of Trump, or the next time he's going insane and proposing a trade war or something. So you're just buying time that you use to have economic stability, and also to reduce your commercial dependence on the US by opening new trade markets with new trade agreements, by introducing by European preferences in a number of sectors. So you're buying time so that you become less dependent on the US. That's kind of the philosophy of the strategy of the Europeans. But yeah, now the Commission says, okay, we want an exemption of 150 billion. We'll see what the US will be saying, accepting or not when it comes to that. And we'll go into an actual trade negotiation. Any questions on the US part of trade? Then we'll go to China. Up. Alright, I don't see anything. Chat is quiet today. Alright, let's go to China. China being indeed a big source of concern for the EU in terms of trade, because we have a huge trade deficit with China, huge dependency, etc., huge illegal practices of China when it comes to trade. So the EU has given itself until October to push Beijing to sort out the problems that they have, and then what do we do beyond October is the open question. So how Europe wants to fix its 1 billion euro a day trade deficit with China. Brussels has kicked off a trade dialogue with Beijing and wants to see results by October. Trade negotiators from the European Commission and Beijing will engage in intense discussions over the next 4 months over how to narrow the EU's 1 billion euro a day trade deficit with China. At a kick-off meeting last month between EU Trade Chief Maros Sefcovic and his Chinese counterpart Wang Wentao, the two agreed to launch a joint trade consultation mechanism. The tool will include 4 workstreams covering trade and investment balancing, exports control, intellectual property rights, and reform of the World Trade Organization. Šefčovič is expected to hold a video conference with Wang in early September before traveling to Beijing in October, when he hopes to present the first tangible results. Denis Rodonnet, the Commission's top trade defense official, held a video call last Thursday with Chinese Vice Minister of Commerce Ling Yi. Rodonnet will update the European Parliament's Trade Committees Tuesday on how the talks are going. Hello! The discussions may lead nowhere, and a trade war can't be ruled out, but for now it appears that both China and the EU want to try to solve their trade differences amicably. Given that China is already dealing with the US, trying to fight them on a commercial, on a trade basis, they probably do not want to add the EU to the mix. Still, given the sheer size of the imbalance and the ongoing economic weakness in China, it's hard to see a solution that would work for both sides. So here's what we're watching. At the heart of the dispute is the 360 billion euro annual trade surplus equal to 1 billion euro per day that China runs with the EU. So that means that we are importing from China 360 billion euro more of products than we send to China. While Chinese firms are ramping up their exports to the single market, European exports to China are falling due both to cutthroat competition in China and a slowdown in consumer spending linked to the collapse of a property bubble. Nowhere is that trend more visible than in the automotive market. Until 2024, the EU was a net exporter of cars and car parts to China. But in 2025, the bloc imported 20 billion euros worth from China more, while exporting 22 billion worth from China, while exporting just 16 billion euro worth. So 6 billion deficit with China. European policymakers accuse Beijing of giving domestic producers an unfair leg up with government money. China says that sours grapes and that domestic businesses have leapfrogged their European rivals in technology. So that comes to the illegal practices of China. The way China is getting an edge on the market is by using illegal subsidies. So you take a Chinese company that is exporting electric vehicles to Europe. In order to beat the competition and so provide lower prices to European consumer on the car, what China is doing is giving subsidies. They give to their industry money, which allow the company to lower artificially its prices because, well, the government is paying the difference, basically. Which means that there is unfair competition with the European car makers because the European car makers are not getting that sort of subsidies which are illegal under trade rules, and therefore they get screwed over. And that's something that the EU and China have been fighting. And as you're saying, Platinum, there should be tariff. There's been some tariff. Like the EU has investigated the case of illegal subsidies in electric vehicles and has concluded that indeed they were illegal and put tariff to correct that. So for instance, for a number of Chinese companies, the EU has said, okay, we saw that you get illegal subsidies that represent the equivalent of, let's say, 30% of the price. So we're going to put a 30% tariff on your product, on your electric vehicles from this company, so that way you go back to the price that it would normally be without the subsidies. It's a way to correct the imbalance. The problem with this method is that it's a case by case and it takes a long time. It takes years of investigations to be able to say, okay, well, actually this company indeed benefited from illegal subsidies, and so I propose a corrective measures, which is not ideal because it takes time, it's only applicable for certain companies, etc., etc. Now the Commission, the EU, wants to have a general solution, which is to say to China, okay, stop these practices. China is saying, no, we're not doing anything wrong, it's just that we're better than you. And rounding goes. So both sides recognize this will be a hard problem to solve. There are two ways the trade deficit could narrow. Europe could start shutting out Chinese exports, or European businesses could export more to China. European officials would love it if Chinese consumers started snapping up more made-in-Europe luxury bags or expensive wines and spirits. But China household spending is currently in a slump. Beijing could enact reforms to put more money in people's pockets, such as by upping welfare spending and slashing taxes. But that would require a disruptive reorientation of the economy towards consumer, and Beijing is unlikely to do so at Europe's behest. That leaves Chinese companies, particularly manufacturers seeking advanced European equipment, as the most plausible source of additional imports. According to one EU diplomat, who was granted anonymity, China has signaled interest in buying more high-end tech, such as the machinery used to manufacture microchip. But while such purchases could make a meaningful dent in the trade deficit, the cutting-edge technology is also sensitive and has dual civilian and military uses. And it is national capitals, not Brussels, that hold a veto over sensitive exports. The very same high-tech equipment they claim, well, yeah, there's that, but it's also for other application. But there, we are also touching on a sensitive topic, which is access to sensitive tech. We do have, in some fields, better tech than the US, than the Chinese, and the Chinese, of course, want to have access to that tech. And so the question is, well, is it in our interest you mentioned ASML, indeed, that is de facto a worldwide monopoly. Is it in our interest to facilitate access to these key technologies that can have both a civilian and a military use to China, which, even if we can trade with them, we acknowledge that they are also a rival. So there, you're not anymore talking only about trade, you're also talking about security, sovereignty, this sort of thing, because of course, the Chinese will import these technologies and they will try to copy them. And so if you facilitate that, that means that, okay, maybe for 5-10 years, China will import this tech, but then they will figure it out and they will produce it themselves and they will stop importing this tech from the EU, or even they could use these technologies against the EU. So balancing act to be done. Subsidize and undercut the EU again, etc., etc. So there is a difficult balance, a question of economic security, and the Commission is aware of that. In the past, von der Leyen has been trying to push for limits on what could be traded with China. That's something that the Commission proposed. The member state didn't like the idea. Was to say, well, for certain sensitive technologies and products, European companies should not be allowed to trade or to facilitate investment in and from China in that, basically to protect ourselves. Member states didn't like this idea because they say, well, actually those are our companies, so you're not the one telling them what they should do or not. And the idea went nowhere. But economic security is a topic that is one of the priority of von der Leyen ever since its first commission. getting the rest of countries using Huawei 5G off Huawei 5G would be a good idea. Well, there is the European approach to that so far has been to say you can use Huawei technology if you want, as long as it's not in sensitive part. Like, do not use Chinese tech, for instance, for things that relate to national security, military, that sort of thing. Like, not the best idea. But if you want to use 5G, Huawei's technology for non-sensitive domain, well, that's up to you. What was I? Okay. So the talks cover more than the trade imbalance. The two sides have also compiled market access lists detailing rules and practices they believe shut them out of the other's markets, according to the diplomat. They've also set up a tool to monitor surges in trade flow that is already up and running. What does the French government use? Do we actually know? I don't have that information right now, but I would imagine that they're using French tech. Like there would be a priority to use a French tech or European, or at the worst American, but I think like they would even avoid American. Let's see. Doing a quick search. Hop. Sorry. This seems to be working either on French tech or on European tech, like Ericsson. Blah, 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 blah. But yeah, they seem to be prioritizing, I mean, probably French tech or European tech. Where was I? They've also set up a tool to monitor surges in trade flow that is already up and running. Beijing would like the EU to roll back legislation and rules it considers unfair and restrictive, including the bloc's proposed Industrial Accelerator Act and its revision of the Cybersecurity Act. In return, Europe would like easier access to China's government procurement market. There we go. So, Cybersecurity Act, this is what I explained. Well, keep Chinese tech out of sensitive cybersecurity components. Industrial Accelerator Act, it's there's two things in there that are of interest for China. Number one, it's the idea of European preference in a number of domains. The idea that public authorities should buy European products in priority in certain sectors, notably when it comes to green tech, in a way to support the development of the European industry in this, and also reduce dependence on non-European technologies, be it Chinese or American. Of course, the Chinese don't like that. And they say, no, that's protectionism, that's unfair, blah, 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 blah. The second part of the Industrial Accelerator Act that the Chinese don't like is extremely ironic. Why? Because it relates to investments. The Commission in the Industrial Accelerator Act is ironically proposing to copy or taking heavy inspiration from a Chinese policy when it comes to investment. In China, if you want to invest, you want to open a factory in China, you want to invest in China as a company, you cannot just buy a factory and settle yourself. You can't. China law says you have to associate yourself with a Chinese company, create a new common company that will be owned at 51% by the Chinese company, and you will basically have to, of course, hire Chinese people, invest in China, etc. But the idea is, well, it has to be a joint venture with Chinese industry. The idea being, well, that way, you support part of our industry, and our industry will also learn from you. And in the Industrial Accelerator Act, the Commission is proposing something very similar. That is, if some company, a non-European company, wants to invest in Europe in certain areas, it would have to set up a joint venture with a European company coming to do investment, hiring in Europe, etc. So the EU is copy-pasting part of the Chinese policy, and now the Chinese are now, no, we don't like you to do the same thing as we did in the past. So it's very ironic that they're doing that. But yeah, that's one of the reasons why the Chinese are attacking the Industrial Accelerator Act. They're not the only ones. Basically, all the non-Europeans are attacking the Industrial Accelerator Act. Does this spread to AI data center and Amazon warehouses? That's warehouses. I don't think so. Data centers, it depends, because Industrial Accelerator Act is very focused on certain specific markets, like green tech, steel, things that are the most polluting. Like the idea of the Industrial Accelerator Act is to support the development of greening the industry. It's a way to say, okay, European industry, if you invest to become more green, you will get advantages, which is like a part of the market that is reserved for you. You will be protected to an extent from non-European competition, etc., etc. So you could make an argument that maybe part of the AI investment could be covered by this, but I'm not certain. I'm not certain. Although I would imagine that a number of people would want that to go that way. Where was I? Okay. Policymakers in Brussels also want China to loosen its stranglehold on critical minerals and have pushed for more transparent procedure and longer-lasting export licenses. That's the big advantage that China has built for itself over the decades. Critical raw material, also called rare earths, or that includes rare earths, that have nothing of rare actually, are components that are essential for a number of things. Like if you want to make batteries, if you want to make solar panels, if you want to build microchips, all sorts of things that are pretty important. For instance, if you are doing a green transition, if you're trying to rearm yourself. And as it happens, China, some medicine, medicine manufacturing maybe, but... and as it happens, China has an almost monopoly at a world level on this. Like, depending on the type of critical mineral that we're talking about, critical raw material that we're talking about, China controls between 70 and 98% of the world supply. Either for the extraction, so taking it off the earth, the refining, or the manufacturing. The EU today, over, again, depending on the critical raw material concerned, over 90% of the critical raw material that we use are from China, which of course creates a tiny bit of a dependence. And the Chinese have shown that they have no problem using that dependency to their advantage. When Trump declared trade war on everyone, and he insisted particularly on China, China, in reaction, sent a warning shot in the sense that they restricted the exports of critical minerals for everyone, saying, well, now we are reducing the amount of export licenses that we're giving, we are preventing licenses to be given in certain cases, etc. So suddenly they squeezed the access to critical raw material, a dependency that they have created themselves, and that not only touched the US, but also Europe, because those restrictions were not only applying to the US. The Europeans were also covered by this, even if they had nothing to do in there. So it was widely read as a warning shot from China to remind to the West, careful, I control something that is very important for you, and you do not want to test me. Which served as a bit of an electroshock, and are we us part of the strategic autonomy? It is part of the push for this. And both the US and now there is a race around the world to secure access to these raw material and reduce the dependencies on China. On the EU side, the EU has been increasing the amount of trade negotiations with countries that have a certain amount of these raw material. Mercosur, Australia, Indonesia, India. One of the reasons why the EU is doing a lot of trade negotiation these days is, one, to reduce its dependence on the US, and two, to reduce their dependence on China. Because, of course, that's something that China has proved they were using. So that is, and also there are strategy internally to try to increase recycling. There's a whole debate about, okay, should we reopen mines in Europe to access our own reserves of lithium and stuff like that. Greenland is indeed also a place where there is a lot of potential in terms of critical raw material. It's hard to access, but there is big deposits. So there is a huge competition on that. And on the US side, the US has proposed what they call the Pax Silica, which is kind of an agreement between the US and the Western allies to secure access and control the price of critical raw material, to counter China, basically. So there is a race on accessing and controlling these critical raw material that are extremely important today for green transition, for militarization, etc., etc. And China is trying to buying. Yeah, China has. They indeed have bought. They obtained a license, a mining license in Greenland. But it's been complicated to access. I mean, mining in Greenland is a nightmare. Yeah, I think it got frozen indeed for environmental reasons. The Greenland population is I'd put its veto on that. I think the Trump Greenland invasion thing was all to reduce the radioactive ppm limits they allow on mining. That, I mean, there were demands from the US. I don't think that Trump wanted to invade the Greenland just for that, but there is indeed a debate on that because, one of the reasons why mining is complicated in Greenland is that, one, I mean, it's not exactly easy to access. So if you open a mine, you have to bring everything with you. There's no infrastructure, so it's extremely costly. It's deep, so it's complicated to access and costly, which in a context where the resource become strategically important, that means that there is potential willingness to make it to bear the cost. And also on the environmental level, you have rules in Greenland that prevent extraction past a certain amount of radioactivity. And the problem is that in Greenland, the critical raw material are laced with uranium deposits, meaning that it increases the radioactivity of the deposit, and it goes above the levels that Greenland wants. And there's a debate on facilitating things. Bye, Tenval. Well, I'm rooting for England, if only to have because Argentina has a bad reputation for this cup, and also because that way that would make a fully European final. All right, where was I? So yeah, the critical raw material thing. The two other workstream, intellectual property and WTO reform, offer avenues to narrower agreements. On the WTO in particular, both sides see scopes for targeted reforms while wanting to preserve the multilateral trading order. Intellectual property, not complicated. China is notorious at allowing intellectual property theft. Tech gets somehow, foreign tech gets somehow stolen when in China, and Chinese courts are not exactly the most diligent to crack down on that. So of course the Europeans want to see improvement on the protection of IP, of their IP, because China is very protective of its own IP, but the IP of Europeans, not so much. And WTO reform, WTO being a bit paralyzed these days because of a lack of reform, the US blocking the appellate body, etc. And on this, there is some common views between the Europeans and China, because both of them want to maintain some level of international rules on trade, because otherwise everyone becomes a Trump, and that's in nobody's interest. So there is a common interest in facilitating some form of reform of WTO to maintain some base rules on trade. In the meantime, Brussels will keep working on ways to retaliate in case talks fail. Commission President Ursula von der Leyen could use a State of the Union speech in September to preview new trade defense tools, such as a diversification instrument or new safeguards for the ailing chemical industry. The Commission has already fired a symbolic warning shot by opening an anti-dumping investigation into imports of Chinese Peking duck meat. Very important. Echoing China's previous duties on the European agri-food sector. That's a tit for tat. So when the Europeans started the investigation on electric vehicles, China started investigation on European agricultural products. So now the Europeans are retaliating on duck meat, etc., etc. So it's tit for tat. But Beijing has cards of its own to play. On Friday, it announced an economically far more significant ban on exports of helium, a gas used in semiconductor manufacturing. So again, the use of dependencies by China. Any questions on that or on anything else? Because that was the final article I had for you today, with a slightly shorter stream than usual, like we had 2 hours. So if you have questions, that's the moment. Also, since the last stream in English, and that I'm doing, like I said at the beginning, since I'm using the summer as a moment where I can update things on the channel and all that. If you have suggestions, things you would like to see on the channel for the next season, ideas and stuff like that, now is the moment to pitch, to make your pitch. I'm all ears on suggestions, and I will ponder them during the summer break to yeah, make things better when we start again in September. But otherwise, what can I tell you before we conclude, unless there are questions? Tac. Shit, I had something in mind and I forgot it. Brain is fried. It's terrible. I'm suffering. I feel a little outside of politics this last month. Heat waves been rough. Yeah. I mean, I have to say, like, in Brussels, we're having like a new heat wave, but it's far from being as bad as elsewhere. Like, and from the first heat wave, like, I don't know where you are in okay, question chat. Where are you from? Where are you? Country? Which country are you from? Like in Belgium, we are like around 30. Like 30, 32 degrees these days. But it gets fresh at night. It goes at 17, 18 degrees at night, and so it cools down a bit. Yeah. So in Brussels, it's not too bad. Like it gets warm, but we could still cool down at night, which was not the case during the first heat wave. And I know that like in France, for instance, it's a bit terrible. They are having the heat wave as badly as before, so it's warm, but we don't have it so bad in Brussels. Pretty hot at night, but not too bad during the day. Yeah. Now you put the bed sheet on the window. Like, my neighbors, they use the technique where they put aluminum foil on their windows. I've seen like people putting survival blankets as well on their windows. On my side, I do nothing. Like, okay, right now it's warm because I'm in my office. There is the computer. There's no aeration, etc. So I gain a couple of degrees for the duration of the stream, but otherwise it's passable in my flat. $40 degrees. Oof, that's rough. Just because of the sun? Like, you must have all the things that that must be. I mean, is it like a huge window that you have? Or? Most of okay, yeah. So that's indeed that does a greenhouse effect. The survival blanket needs to be put on the right side. Yeah, otherwise you will not like the results. Indeed. Yeah, indeed. If you have like large windows, indeed, that must become a bit complicated. I mean, fortunately, like on my flat, I don't have I have windows, but it's not so bad. And since I have windows on both sides of the flat, I can create a bit of an airflow. So I manage somehow. Like during the first heat wave, there's only like the final couple of days where like I could not cool down anymore. Even at night, it was becoming a bit heavy, but for the most part, I'm managing. I'm not complaining. Like people have it far worse than me. Yeah, they put the survival on the outside. Yeah. But well, I hope that this heat wave will, if not pass, at least be a bit less violent and not last the entire summer. Otherwise, that's definitely not going to be enjoyable for anyone. That's for sure. But stay hydrated. Put whatever you need on the windows to protect from the heat. But I'm lucky also at the office. I have the AC. Not in here, but when I go to work, I have the AC. So that's very comfortable. I have to say that makes it very comfortable. To the point that even on days where I'm supposed to do home office, I go to the office nonetheless because I have the AC there. So pretty good. Anyway, next time I see you, it's gonna be in French on Friday at 5 as usual. But it's not a news review. It's FAQ politique. So as usual, it's ask me anything kind of session. If you can't attend or you don't speak French, you don't know how to write French, what you could do, I have my NGL account. I will put the link in the chat. That way you can send me anonymously questions in advance and I answer them during the stream. It works pretty well. It has worked pretty well in the past, so I keep using this method up. So you can ask your questions in advance, and I will answer them during the stream. I will answer them in French, of course. If you want to ask the question in English, ask the question in English. It's fine, of course, but I will do the answer in French, of course. And otherwise, on Tuesday next week, gaming. I will see if I do that in French or in English. It will depend a bit on the mood. I'm not telling you yet the game. It's not the game we have played. But there will be a link with Europe. So it will be fun. It will be fun and topical, as one says. And yeah, otherwise, I think I've said everything. As usual, if you like what you saw, during this stream and this season, don't forget to like. If you have a Prime lying around, do toss a coin to your streamer. That's always appreciated, especially since now I've gone corporate. And now I have my company. So no, it's an exaggeration. I gone corporate, so basically I'll take all the monies. And otherwise, well, if I don't see you on Friday or next week for the gaming stream, I wish you all a good summer. Stay fresh, and we will be back early September for more European content, more new things. I'm crying. Like I said, during this summer, I will keep myself busy. I hope I will be able to do everything that I want to, because it will be nice. There will be lots of new content on the stream and elsewhere, and yeah, that will be exciting if it happens like I want it to happen. But see you in a month and a half to see if I manage to do everything. And yeah, have a good one, guys. Enjoy your holidays if you have holidays, and see you on Friday or in September. Bye everyone. See you next time.